Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to UK Agri-Tech Centre, Midlands Innovation Hub here at Harper Adams University campus. Don't mind sharing with you, the original plan today was to be down at the House of Lords to share this event, but there's something going on. I think state opening of Parliament, which means that some of the meeting rooms and spaces are a bit of a premium today, so we had a rethink. So look, welcome to those of you that are joining us in the room here today, and thank you to those that are joining online as well. Really delighted to see so many familiar faces in the audience. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Bicknell. I'm Chief Executive at UK Agri-Tech Centre. And the last time I stood here in this room was just a little over 3 months ago at our launch event. So we were just a couple of weeks old then as one organisation and kicking off the launch of UK Agri-Tech Centre and our new beginning. And it's great to be back here, great to be getting our teeth into a project which is core and critical to our organisation's aims and objectives. And that's to accelerate agri-tech innovation and do that in partnership with industry and do that in partnership across the supply chain with a whole host of stakeholders that ultimately we serve and we work with. Now, one thing that I talk regularly about is the challenge we face in terms of getting ahead of the curve. So starting to think today about some of the challenges and the problems of tomorrow. And ultimately being better prepared, particularly from an innovation perspective. Now, I don't underestimate that challenge. We face so many issues in our industry in the here and now. And when I go back to the Warwickshire livestock farm that I grew up on and put that hat on, I guess I'm stressing about the weather, like every other farmer over the last few months. I'm probably a little bit bothered about TB test and upcoming challenges around that. And given the efforts I'm trying to do around rotational grazing, I'm always worried about whether the batteries are charged enough to make sure the cattle don't go walkabout. But the point is, I guess I'm thinking in the here and now. The challenge for me, and I think our industry as a whole, is how do we get better prepared, get our heads up and look ahead to some of the issues that we face in the future. And our intention is that this report that we're launching today, and you'll be able to download via the QR code after you leave the meeting room, is that it helps us in starting to think ahead, to be better prepared, to face up to some of the big challenges that we know are coming our way, and to focus in critically on how innovation can make a difference to that. So as I say, thanks for joining us today. I think in combination with those in the room and those that signed up online, we've got an audience of over 250, so many thanks to everybody for joining that. And that's with people that stretch across our sector, across livestock and aquaculture, from academia and research right through to those at the sharp end in the food and drink industry, including a whole host of folks on the way, including people from the policy environment and of course folks from the press. So big warm welcome to you all joining us here today. And some of you will have been involved in creating and contributing to this report. We kicked this off several months ago, actually, so ahead of the new organisation emerging. And I presume that you're all keen to hear more about its contents. And importantly, we're all part of the same ecosystem. We're all part of the agri-food and the agri-innovation sector that is aiming to make a difference. Again, I said this a few months ago when I stood here. Ours is a really impressive industry, a really impressive sector, but there's quite a degree of fragmentation. So one of the things that I'm passionate about is how we can start to join that up, particularly in a critical industry that is so vital to us, whether it's feeding us, whether it's clothing us, whether it's crucial to our survival, but also to our natural environment. And one of the things that I always kind of remind ourselves as well is that the economic importance. I'm conscious of changing government and some of the rhetoric around economy being a bit more forward. Let's not forget that food and drink manufacturing is the largest manufacturing sector, bigger than aerospace and automotive combined. And ultimately, I start to think that what works for agri-tech, what we can help deliver, where we can move the needle, well, that starts to have big positives in terms of moving the dial from the economy perspective, from the environment, and a broader society angle. So the report that we're about to delve into examines the R&D and the innovation needs for the livestock and aqua sectors over the next 10 years. Now, 10 years might sound maybe just a little bit arbitrary, a little bit too neat perhaps, but I think if we look back to 2014 and how the world has changed since then, some of the challenges that our industry has faced and continues to face, whether that's around some of the conflict in certain parts of the world, whether it's around the changing regulatory landscape, whether it's politics and policy, whether it's climate change, or the generation-defining consequences of COVID. Our world continues to shift and change. I suppose that magical crystal ball in terms of looking forward to the future does not exist, but I've always felt that we can start to navigate some known quantities and some known challenges. So the big one for me when I think about our industry is about our ability to produce enough food to meet a growing global population, but doing that with some challenges around possibly fewer tools in our toolbox to be able to produce food, and certainly making sure that what we do as an industry and that food production angle is very much coming from a sustainable perspective. And that economically and environmentally sustainable systems is probably key to some of the thinking in terms of what we've done. Now, I firmly believe that the UK Agri-Tech Centre has a very important role to play in horizon scanning, in terms of helping the industry stay ahead of the curve, in terms of identifying and addressing some of the current and future challenges. And I think it's always crucial to study these in more detail, to understand the challenges, to help define the positive role that Agri-Tech can play and our industry can more broadly play when it comes to introducing innovation. And particularly given the long lead times that characterise our sector, and particularly given the long lead times that we have for innovation full stop, I think as soon as we can start preparing for the issues and challenges of tomorrow, the better prepared we'll be for facing up to them and making that positive change that we all want. So this report has benefited from contributions from some of you here in the room. More broadly, we've had people from across the industry, a host of contacts, industry specialists and broader sector specialists contribute to this. So we've aimed to make sure that it includes and reflects the latest evidence on the innovation needs for our sector. It also highlights the long-term solutions that are required. It's not just about flagging up where the problems are, it's about trying to highlight where the answers may be. And while some of the innovation themes that we have in the report perhaps might seem familiar to you, we've also examined some of the subjects that perhaps are less likely to grab the headlines. And maybe ensuring attention that all of the areas where innovation can make a difference have an appropriate focus. We're aware of obstacles, whether they're funding, whether it's scaling up, whether it's industry adoption. All of those can hinder some great ideas, some great inventions from actually being implementable innovation. And the UK Agri-Tech Centre, well, look, we exist. Our role is to help resolve some of these challenges. We're here to make sure that our world-class network of experts, research facilities are able to test, demonstrate and validate new ideas and ultimately support that effective uptake at scale and at pace. So we're eager not only to share some of the evidence and information that we've got, but also use it as a springboard to future research priorities, whether that's ideas for projects or broader collaborative programs. We also want to highlight areas that might need more resources and more focus, whether that's around investment in the sector more broadly, whether it's around specific capital infrastructure. We want to try and promote the discussion and explore the potential around that. So as I say, for me, this report should really act as a catalyst for stakeholders across the supply chain, whether that's food farming, whether it's aqua, whether it's science, whether it's government. And ultimately, I want us to come together as one network to explore solutions for the sector. And we really do invite you to share your thoughts and feedback on what would help advance the sector. What steps can we take now that can shape the future? What are the challenges that we can start to address to make sure that we're effectively maximising the opportunities that I still think we have from an agri-food perspective? So thanks to everyone who has contributed. You're going to hear from those people who've been integral in producing the report today, including Grace O'Gorman, and this was a catalyst and a kernel of idea that we probably had in autumn of last year about mapping out some of the long-term challenges as we were starting to think about the long-term challenges that we would have for UK Agri-Tech Centre. So really pleased to see this come to fruition. First of all, we're going to hear though from Dr. Ruth Bastow. She's our Innovation Director at UK Agri-Tech Centre, who's going to elaborate a bit more in terms of how our company works, our ambitions and aspirations when it comes to providing some of the leadership for the sector on some critical issues. Following Ruth, we're going to delve into some of the detail with Grace, and then Helen, our Engagement Director, is going to chair a panel session, and that will be your opportunity to fire questions at us and delve into the detail a little bit more. So I do trust that you find today's report, today's discussions and the broader report valuable. Look forward to your feedback and your thoughts as we progress. And please, if today's conversations and the next hour and a half does provoke and prompt and spark any ideas, please do speak to team members that are here today. There's a lot of us here in the room. For those of you online, please get in touch and keep the questions coming through the chat function. We're really looking forward to addressing some of the challenges that livestock and aquaculture faces and understanding how we can do more to help the sector achieve its goals. Thank you, and over to Ruth.
So thanks, Phil. And as you said, I'm Ruth Bastow. I'm Innovation Director at the UK Agri-Tech Centre. And as someone with a background in crop genetics and breeding, I may be a new face to some of you in the room, but I'm really looking forward to getting to know you and working with you in the future. So, I have to say, one of the best things about my new role at the UK Agri-Tech Centre is working with a wide range of expertise and sector specialists. Animal health, feed and nutrition, aquaculture, engineering, data, sustainability, soil health, to mention just a few. And for me, it's that critical mass that we have across the sector that is part of our USP at the UK Agri-Tech Centre. And it's the fact that we're now under one roof, well I guess sort of we are, and we span across the sector, which means we can now take this really holistic and system-wide approach to looking at the problems we have today, but more importantly, the challenges we're also going to have to face up to tomorrow. And it's now that not that sector we span, but we also have this ability to be able to go from idea to impact. We can fish that idea out of the lab, we can take it out into field trials and eventually get it into the hands of end users. And it's this bridging the gap that we talk about, going from research to industry, so that we can take idea to impact and really make a difference, is what we're here to do. And for me, actually, it's actually going from industry back to research is where our USP is as well. It's about thinking about what is the problem and how are we going to solve it. And thinking about that, I'm going to show you a little bit of what we're thinking about by the framework that we're thinking about for innovating in our sector. And this is all about how we accelerate your agri-tech ambition. What is it that you want to do? How do we get that right solution to your problem? How do we get your business to grow? And how do we drive impactful and rapid change? We do this via 4 key areas that we've got here: connect, inspire, grow, and adopt. I'm going to take each one of these as we go forward here. So, one of them in connect is how we act as a nexus. How we do that sector cohesion. We know our sector can be really fragmented, it's really difficult to understand. Who do you talk to, where do you go to? So what we really want to do is try to help coordinate that landscape, navigate a path through it for you, potentially give you that map to get through. Thinking about ways in which we can do this, maybe brokering those collaborations across the supply chain you're missing. Thinking about actually being that independent sector convener. Building awareness about a new technology you might need, you might not know about, but really being that champion for UK agri-tech and innovation. Inspire, this is what you hear about today, all about strategic leadership for our sector. Thinking about how we do that industry foresight. Thinking about how we're prepared for what we might be peeking around the corner at. That's what you're going to hear about in the report today as well. It's also about lifting us up, a helicopter view, big picture thinking, so then we can think about how we tackle those complex and long-term challenges. One of the ways we're going to do that, thought leadership reports, you'll hear about our first one today, and there's more as we go through into the year. Also horizon scanning, thinking about the challenges we have out there, but also our opportunities, maybe looking at other sectors, maybe automotive, maybe AI, how do we use them, how can we take them in? And then lastly, thinking about our open innovation approach. I often describe this as being a hive mind, getting ideas from everywhere. Phil often talks about me getting those people in the room, different stakeholders, different viewpoints. And in doing that, you get that slightly different perspective on the problem, eventually get your light bulb moment. That'll be the start of building your game-changing solution, and that's what we want. Now, grow. This is the biggest part of what we're doing at the Agri-Tech Centre. It's our engine room. It's our beating heart. And what we're doing is driving business growth and scaling innovation. And we do this by working alongside industry, understanding industry's need, and only then by understanding it can we work with you to co-develop those compelling and economically viable products to get them into the marketplace. We do that via our in-house expertise. You're going to meet some of those guys today. We also do it via our cutting-edge research and infrastructure we have across the country. What we use it to do, validate those early-stage ideas. Are they going to work? Are they not? Test and trial those proof of concepts. Really think about how you might support product development. So what we can start to do is get that scientifically robust solution to your real-life problem. Then lastly, adopt, and this is critical. If ideas stay up here, they're in the lab, they're on the workbench, they're just that. They're not inventions. What we need to do is get them out there. We need to de-risk them. We need to accelerate the adoption. And to do that, we need an evidence base. We need data and information. Then we can validate that technology, that approach. We also need to verify its effectiveness. Is it really going to work? You know, what's the cost base for it? Does it work in real life scenarios? Can you chuck it out in all weathers? Is it going to work in a different soil, going to go from clay to sand? So looking about those and looking at different production systems as well. And then think about how we showcase those technologies using some of our demonstration platforms so we can do some of that peer-to-peer learning. All of this together will help us increase the trust and hopefully the uptake of the adoption. So a quick whistle-stop tour of our framework for accelerating innovation. And we're thinking about what we want to do and connect, inspire, grow, adopt, and hopefully you'll come on the journey among this with us. Gives you a little idea of our framework that we're looking for the future. And this is the framework that makes us unique. We can apply this to any problem. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what the technology is, doesn't matter what the sector is. We're always happy to help you all. And we'll be able to use this to translate idea into impact. We'll be able to use this to drive productivity, economy and business growth across the sector and also across the supply chains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Fantastic to see an overview of the whole framework. I want to extend my own thank you to you all for joining today, both in the room. It's fantastic to see so many familiar and new faces, but also online, covering all four parts of this great nation. So international visitors as well, very welcome online. I suppose today, first and foremost, is a chance for us all just to stop and take a breath and ask the question, what do we need for the UK livestock aquaculture sectors in the next 10 years to get us into good shape? What do we need to do, and how, more importantly, can we make that happen? And that's the beginning of this, thinking about that conversation with this report. So today what I will do is I will walk you through, give you some context, and also pick up on some of the highlights and some of our observations from that report. So we've talked a little bit already about those multiple challenges which are incredibly familiar to you. But in reality, the sectors that we're working with, aquaculture and livestock, are an absolute wellspring of innovation in themselves and adept at actually translating those challenges into commercially viable solutions. And of course, we sit within that ecosystem. We really want to ensure that we've got impact in there. So there's every reason to kick off and do this in a big way. And there's a fantastic opportunity thinking about the real drive to accelerate where we need to go to. We've seen and begin to see transformation in our systems to more resilient and sustainable platforms, but we've got to go faster. And I can't help but say the launch of the Agri-Tech Centre is very opportune in terms of taking a fresh look at this. So in terms of the scope and approach, just to get a sort of a mindset of where we are with this, the livestock sector, we're covering dairy, beef, sheep, pig, poultry and aquaculture. We've consulted widely with a number of stakeholders, both from the academic background, but importantly commercial businesses as well, representative organisations right across the supply chain. So this is a stakeholder view in terms of what those priorities are and pointing to some of the solutions. And we did this by a number of workshops, one-to-one interviews and questionnaires. And so today, to give you an idea of how we're going to frame that, we'll talk about those big thematic priorities. There's 11 of them. These are the big ticket items that will apply to many of those sectors in terms of their importance. But I'd also like to pick up on some sector-specific requirements that might resonate for your particular sector. We'll step back then and look at a wide lens view of the landscape. We'll talk about some of those key ingredients, whether that's funding, whether it's the capability, expertise that's required. All of these things need to fall into place to ensure that we get where we need to go. And finally, really interestingly, I think we've asked you what you expect yourselves, your sector, your business from the Agri-Tech Centre. And I think that's important for us to reflect that in what we do as well. So let's go straight into the thematic priorities. If you look at that middle lane, starting with animal health and welfare, right to data, assets and technologies, these are the 11 core thematic areas that were identified that will apply to many of the sectors. And these are the areas that our industry has said we really need solutions going forward. We've mapped these specifically onto our strategic areas. our themes, and they're One Health, sustainable production, resilient food systems, and intelligent agriculture. And this is very deliberate. It shows in a very real way that what is a priority to our sectors has a home within the Agri-Tech Centre in terms of our ways of working, in terms of strategic alignment. If we take One Health, that encompasses both animal health, animal welfare, topics such as food safety, and really recognises the interconnectedness, of course, between animals, ecosystems, people, the environment that they're in, and is hugely important in terms of food security and sustainability as well. Sustainable production, ever increasingly important for how we produce today, but also into the future. We're going to need more and more climate smart solutions. We're seeing a huge wellspring of them coming forward, but it's the next evolution and integration of them. And with one eye firmly on productivity and major themes around diets and nutrition in there as well across the sectors. Resilience is probably a real buzzword in every sector in terms of how we cope with many of the challenges we're faced and will continue to face. And so some of the ingredients that have been pointed out as being really important is looking at ecosystems, biodiversity improvements, so that we can add to that resilience. So being in a position where we can tackle not only and come back from the various stressors that we have in our systems, but also thinking about reorientation as well in the future. So land performance and overall systems optimization. And intelligent agriculture, I see this as one of the core underlying foundational stones that can actually bring lots of the other thematic areas to life. Whether that's data, AI, the flows, the actionable insights you can get from it, it really does help us do incredible things with our other areas. So I'm going to pick up a couple of examples from each of these just to bring them to life a little bit more. I was very tempted to go with animal health, but actually I think there's an even more interesting story in the animal welfare feedback that we're getting. And you can see here there's a list of some of the top things that came out. You can dive into these in more detail in the report. But if I could make a couple of observations, certainly if we look at intensive systems, and it also applies to extensive systems, looking at the environment and what we can do, not just enrichment, but continuous monitoring to understand them in a way that allows us to integrate into particularly food assurance schemes. So looking at food assurance for the future, looking at really integrated solutions that have benefits not only for the obvious one, practicalities in terms of biosecurity, having less people on site, but in terms of consumer and societal pressures and understanding those systems. And I think that can really kick off other changes in terms of welfare in the environment and management practices as well. But there's a story outside in terms of climate change impacts as well and how they will affect welfare. We need to be able to understand everything from heat stress to exotic disease incursions, and all of those will have major potential impacts on welfare. And so there's a real drive to really develop solutions that work in our outdoor extensive systems as well. I will say more broadly, if we look at animal behaviour and welfare, that science needs to continue and evolve. In our aquaculture sectors, it's looking at some of the more non-traditional species, and of course insects as well, coming into scope and understanding how these fit into the current practices. And with what we're doing, we can clearly see ways in which this can happen. So I talked about farm assurance. I can see that as a huge project that could really bring lots of people from across the supply chain and deliver real solutions. The second example will zone in on climate smart solutions sitting under our sustainable production theme, and not unexpectedly, a real focus here in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, looking at not only the measurement, the methodologies, reporting of them, which are hugely important and mentioned in a number of those individual points. There's 10 here shown today, but also pointing to where some of the solutions are. And some of these are further or lesser along in terms of their journey, but I think they've been recognised as ones to absolutely watch. And they go from feed additives, but particularly looking towards the microbiome, and in this case the gut microbiome. And we think microbiome science is really turning a corner, so in the next 10 years offering the kind of solutions that we think will be quite game-changing on the ground. But genetics coming to the fore, and I'm always a fan of pushing forward on progressive genetics. I'm sure a number of our breed societies are in the audience today. And increasingly we're looking at not just genetic improvement that will directly contribute to reducing greenhouse gas efficiency, but looking at it in an overall system. So that's good to see as well. And we absolutely want to help develop the next generation of these tools and practices and driving those insights. So we are managing our ecosystems, our natural capital, and also the food production as well. The final one of these big ticket ones that I'll point out is around ecosystems and biodiversity improvement. And this is one that gets a lot of attention. It's going to become even more mainstream. Lots of you will be involved in this. And it's those ecosystem services, whether it's the biodiversity, looking at the habitat quality, air and water quality, measuring on farm. And we've certainly been really active in this spot, working with commercial farms, looking at innovative technologies, joining it all up so that we can see how that works. And it's translating that across to a very mainstream environment, becoming day to day and iterating to the next level as well. That'll be important. Point 6 there is one I'll point out to you, the optimization of land use. Whether we're talking about land use strategies or land use frameworks, that's something we've got to get to grips with and understanding, and the evidence base behind what's useful and what's suitable to use land so that we can feed animals and people into the future. So let's take a moment to have a little look at the various sectors. I'm just going to pick out some. Keep in your mind that those big thematic areas apply to many sectors. So this is just to give a bit more flavour for each one of them. Housing features quite strongly here. And when I think about planning and I think about the time frame required to amend housing, whether it's in poultry or pigs, we've got to look at that 10-year time span. But it can deliver, and it should deliver a whole suite of benefits, whether you're looking directly at welfare, but also management of your energy requirements as well, and disease pressure. So biosecurity being really important along with that monitoring. Welfare featuring really highly. So you'll think of things like obviously tail biting, looking at free farrowing systems, slaughter, transport, all of those issues. We want to see the next generation iteration pulling forward on them. And of course, slurry management, manure management, that is going to be one of those key circular themes that's going to keep coming back, and understanding them will be key for that sector. Looking at another monogastric sector, our poultry sector, again, housing featuring there as well. And of course, in broiler production, it's that balance between the production efficiency, the feed efficiency, and also key welfare challenges. But one in particular jumped out and was highlighted by our stakeholders, and that is around the culling of male chicks, and using innovation and being aware of it and adopting it through the sector identifies one of the most significant perceived challenges for them. And there are solutions out there for sure. There's both invasive, non-invasive in ovo sexing techniques. Some of you in your parts of your supply chain may be involved in this already. It's taking it to the next level so that we can really remove the need to cull male chicks. But I can't let the poultry section finish without talking about animal health in this respect. Avian influenza, we published a report last year on this. It was a particularly bad year, of course. But it is really an indication as to the fact that we've got to think differently about exotic disease and what we need to set ourselves up. So whether it's biosecurity, whether it's breeding, whether it's a more connected system to understand the real risk. And of course, welfare through all these systems. I mentioned welfare at slaughter and litter management as well, really important. Now, the aquaculture sector, for my aquaculture colleagues, they will tell me it's not just salmon. And although salmon is the #1 food export in the UK, it's hard to ignore that. But lots of this feedback will be related. But I've got to say, think about your other finfish, think about trout, think about seaweeds, mussels. There's a huge spectrum, and it is such an innovative sector. I think it deserves all that attention. So genetics being really important, of course. And there is that issue and the worry around the release in terms of wild diluting or contaminating wild genetics. Huge evolution underway in terms of understanding welfare in lots of different aquatic species, and that starts with more behavioural studies, looking at how you can monitor and measure that behaviour, particularly using technology, AI, video in the aquatic environment, which also makes things much more interesting when trying to make all that work. But we've got to think about what are their key challenges. So whether it's predators, looking at fish health and welfare, parasite management, sea lice will be a key one there, but overall health in terms of reducing the use of chemicals that end up in the aquatic environment. But as I said, a highly innovative sector, lots going on in terms of solutions for those. If we move across to our ruminants, you'll know in terms of the dairy sector, we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions till the cows come home, literally, and that's important. There's more conversation about what that looks like in extensive and intensive systems. So we can look at biodiversity, we can look at the intensity and make some decisions around that. And lots of indications as to how we can begin to reduce it. We've seen products coming out on the market for that. Housing still features really, really strongly, and modifications of housing, particularly to support some better welfare outcomes, manure management key as well, and just some of the basics, extending the breeding life of these animals. Some of this is old hat, but actually is fundamental and really important that we get it right. Now, as we move towards our beef and sheep sectors, there'll be some overlap here. Genetics, fantastic to see that front and centre, and as I said, there's even more reasons to look at genetic progress now, maximising our output. Disease, really important. I can't let this slide go by without thinking about things like BVD. There's no good reason why we should still have BVD in the UK. It's infinitely controllable and eradicatable. Let's go for that. Manure management out in the environment, so using anthelmintics. We're talking about big systems here and their very real impact in how we measure them. So innovative practices and new solutions are needed there. Right, looking at our hugely diverse sheep sector, genetics again coming up front and centre, really important. Looking at it not just in terms of purebred flocks, but also optimum sire genetics for crossbred ewe types as well. We talk about food a lot. It's probably important just to say it's more than about food. It's about co-products, it's about byproducts, and for the sheep sector, wool, of course, hugely important. So let's see what we can do in terms of innovation there. Parasite management, that's something that's going to, it's an old nugget that keeps going, but I think there's been more scrutiny, and it will rightly be even more so in the future around what we use in animals and their impact on the environment as well. That is crucially important, particularly if you look at our waterways and needing to protect them. There's lots more in the report. I don't want to bamboozle you with everything today. This is our opportunity to step back and look at those bigger ingredients that we need. Capabilities are really important. And of course, we've heavily invested in these over the last number of years. And we asked what's required in the future, what's required of us for the next 10 years and beyond collectively. And the firm answer that came back is it's facilities that look at systems, the whole life cycle research, ways in which we can model circular facilities, testing various concepts. And I always think of manures when I think of circular systems. Both on farm, but of course farms that are commercial, real world scenarios, and collecting that data at the local level, regional, landscape level. Luckily, we've got those facilities, and I think this is a serious reinforcement for why they're so important and to continue to invest in them. Some honourable mentions as well. Meat sector certainly said we need more in terms of meat science capability, and also wet chemistry laboratory facilities. I think that's reflecting some of the analytical science we need, particularly on the environmental side. But people, expertise, really vitally important. We need to facilitate the entry of more highly qualified staff into these areas. Nutritionists came up, can't have enough of them apparently. Really important. I think the environmental themes are driving this. We're changing genetics, we're trying to match nutrition to it. We're changing housing, looking at nutrition as well. Meat quality, so direct links to the consumer, we need more of that. But to be honest with you, that's buried by a much bigger story that's coming at us, and that is around data scientists, biostatisticians, bioinformaticians, I know a couple, get to know them, and systems researchers. We were quite clearly told that the lack of these will severely impact what people see as the most important area of research in the next 10 years. That it is important to take note of. Funding, money makes the world go round. The feedback is that we're relatively, in very broad strokes, happy in terms of, up to this point, access to funding. Of course, and hopefully it won't go without saying, which is why I'll just say it, we want to see that continue. I must give an honourable mention again to the aquaculture sector. It tends to be not in scope for some of the funding that's out there, and yet they're one of the most innovative sectors we have. So let's have a look at how we can make that happen. But there were some clear gaps, and it's that long-term view, not just looking at a couple of years, but if we're modelling systems and we want to test what changes in those systems look like, we've got to think longer term, and we've got to look at systems where we can model. Our stakeholders are also really conscious of funding following government policy. And there was a very specific ask into us to be that conduit, to ensure that there's an ear to the ground, that it makes sense, that it aligns with what industry needs. And I think that is something that's really important. And also, it's not just funding the research. Increasingly, we're seeing knowledge exchange growing up the agenda and adoption. We've got to help move those products and services, not just onto market, but the people, the end users, being really involved in the entry of them in the first place. So lots more of that, please. I'm putting this slide in here to say there was so many conversations around the need to collaborate, to communicate, to do more knowledge exchange. In the report, we've got lots of specific recommendations from our stakeholders on how that should look within the centre, and I encourage you to read it. But they were particularly passionate about making that happen, and nods to, as we said, the fragmented sector and the real need for it. So finally, I'm going to talk about what we were told quite directly about what we should be doing. This is always a good sense check. Does it make sense? Do we need to correct course? And one that I direct squarely at our CEO. Thanks, Phil. And interestingly, it's the showing what we have. And that sounds quite straightforward, but actually, for innovators in the UK, for people who want to get involved in research, for businesses, having that overall visual and accessibility to all of the capabilities that we have and spotlighting the research and development potentials that sit behind them is absolutely crucial. I'm also thinking of our international guests as well, landing in the UK and making it really easy to navigate and partner with us to do that research. The various professional services we have came up as well as important, from help with the CR&D funding, commercial funding, but also technical project management and knowledge exchange. But going around to the left-hand side here, there's a bigger strategic piece and specific ask that we're asked to look at. And it's, as I've mentioned, the longer-term funding systems research. People want to see more action on that, to inform funders and government and provide that link, and to act really as a nidus for collaboration, for partnerships, for proactive matching, to help people come together and really provide the independent strategic leadership that, with an evidence base behind it, to be a trusted partner. And so, with all of that, and there's so much more behind it in terms of detail, 3 things just really stood out to me, aside from the detail we've talked about, as coming through, as really strongly through what we've heard over the last number of months. It really is all about systems, okay? There is an increasing complexity in how we farm and produce food, and we're looking to do more circular systems. We need the space to test and trial all sorts of solutions that can give us some predictiveness about what that might look like. So whether we're thinking about things that have a positive effect, adding 2 of them into the system and having an outcome. So we've got to take what is not a new concept, it's been around for quite a while, but use it as a lens and apply it to everything we do with innovation. People, I talked about some of the expertise that perhaps is in short supply, and it's one to watch, absolutely. But also when I think of people, I think of the citizens, I think of consumers, I think of the angle on welfare and sustainability. They're part of the process in terms of what we're doing. We mustn't forget them. And the economics, the bottom line, whether it's the return on investment, whether it's the cost of investing in these innovations, getting people to adopt them, we absolutely need to be driven by that and ensure we don't lose sight of it in what we're doing. And finally, I hope you've seen something of interest to you that resonates with you in this report. Hopefully you'll recognise that it's not just a report, it is a clear indication to come and to speak and to collaborate with us. It's a fantastic opportunity. We've got so many really grand challenges, but actually the impact we can have is so great. It's quite an interesting time, I think, to work in the agri-tech space. And you'll see lots of people with a lot of passion around this. It's slightly infectious in the best possible way, but it means that it's quite a unique space. And I think the bringing together of livestock and aquaculture together is one of those opportunities in terms of what we can do to join up. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I will take questions when we join the panel. It will be over now to our Director of Engagement, Helen Brooks, to take the floor and to lead us through the next session. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks everyone. So those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Helen Brooks. I'm the Engagement Director here at the UK Agri-Tech Centre. Wow, we've heard from 3 really fantastic presentations and speakers this morning already. So really the next section is about bringing that all together and being part of a bit of a discussion. So we want to hear from yourselves, and especially we want to hear from those online. So if you are online and listening to this, please pop your questions into the Q&A section, please. And then what we'll do is we'll start by introducing our panellists. So if they would like to take their seats, please, we will move through to the panel session. So one of the really clear actions when reading the report and hearing from Grace and others today has really been around collaboration. So in the spirit of that, we have brought together a fantastic panel so that we can really sort of pick their minds, and also yours in the audience, around that development of the report and the development of the sectors as well. And really thinking about how do we discuss some of those key findings, but importantly, how do we really get together that discussion on the ways that we're gonna move forward on this to create that sustainable and resilient sort of business area that we really want to focus on across all of the sectors for the good of the industry. So you've met Grace O'Gorman, and you've also met Phil today, so I will then introduce you to the rest of the panel. So first off, Carl Williams, who's the Director of FAI Farms. Coming from a farming family, Carl has almost 40 years in the agriculture sectors, with experience and working on managing livestock operations in both the UK and internationally as well, and has spent several years auditing livestock production within that time. Since 2007, Carl moved to working more in the sustainability consultancy and farming business, and now works for FAI Farms, working with clients both nationally and internationally to help formulate and deliver against their sustainability commitments. He oversees operations and manages projects on their 1,000-acre tenanted organic farm in Oxfordshire, and with current projects focusing on regenerative grazing, reducing greenhouse gas and emissions as well. Carl, thank you ever so much for providing your time today. And next we have Anthony Marsh, Director of Hoof Count. Anthony is the founder and co-director of Hoof Count Limited and works within the dairy sector and has done for over 30 years. Combining his passion with engineering skills and also with innovative outlooks, he's helped to make Hoof Count a global leader in cattle lameness control. Hoof Count is still a Lancashire-based family business, but is invested heavily in R&D with the support of Innovate UK funding, and successfully produced a trial an AI-based machine learning vision system, which I hopefully will hear a bit about shortly. We've now started as what started as a single person startup business has now got over 20 employees and growing with interest across 30 countries, including Europe, USA, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, which is fantastic. And finally we have Jack James, the founder and MD of Pontus Research. Jack has a PhD in fish nutrition and postdoctoral career spanning his commercial wrasse production in Madagascar and also commercial research in Malta, and has spent the last 10 years in the UK and specifically in Wales. In 2014, he created Pontus Research to be a market-leading R&D service provider to the global aquaculture industry, and since has grown the business to employ 17 people at sites both in the UK excuse me, and over in Singapore, where they're investing over £1 million in state-of-the-art facilities with feed production and the facilities in Wales as well. And that recently they've also been running an international sustainable feed development project focusing on UK ingredients for the UK feed. Jack is also involved in local CIC distribution of funds as well into the local community, which is very much business focused. So welcome everyone to the panel, and thank you ever so much for your time again. So first of all, I'd just like to really provide you with an opportunity to give us a bit more information on your business, the research areas that you sort of tackle, and thinking about some of your priorities moving forward over the next 5 to 10 years. So maybe Anthony, can I ask you to go first to really give us a rounded approach to yourself, the business, and those priorities that you're really focusing on.
No problem. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm Anthony. We started a business, Hoof Count Limited, 12 years ago. My background before that was milking machines. Always been passionate about animal health, welfare, looking at mastitis control, which I started doing 30 years ago, which was probably the biggest issue within the dairy industry at the time. About 12 years ago, I got asked to make an automatic foot bath. What is that? It's basically just a foot bath that cows walk through, but that would change itself after so many cows because farmers were under pressure with time, didn't have time to change the solution, and then quickly realised over that time that lameness was now the biggest issue in the dairy industry. Nobody likes to see a lame cow. It's a big problem for animal welfare. It's a big public perception problem. So we spent the last 12 years really trying to help farmers prevent problems. And in the last 2 years, we've done an Innovate UK project, which has been an absolutely fantastic achievement for us as a company to be able to go from, as I said before, me on my own 12 years ago to now 20 odd of us, and actually use Innovate UK to be able to create a collaboration between ourselves, the Agri-Tech centres, and Bristol Robotics Laboratory, to be able to come up with something that's completely above my head, which is an AI machine learning vision system. Now, it really would have been a dream many years ago to have something like this, but we've successfully completed this project and brought to the market what we class as PediView, which is basically AI machine learning, taking pictures of cows' hooves and giving very early identification of lameness to the dairy herd. Now, this is something that years ago we would have dreamed about and has now been possible. So that's my background, that's where I've come from, and I still am passionate about trying to get this industry, which I think is the best industry in the world, giving better technology, more data through there, but also going worldwide. We have a worldwide company now, which is great. The UK is leading the way in a lot of research and innovation that we're doing. We need to continue doing that, and with the help of Agri-Tech Centre, Innovate UK, we can do that sort of thing.
That's
Is that enough?
That's fine. So what comes next, I suppose, is the question. Where are those next priorities? What's the next steps for Hoof Count?
So we're gathering a lot of data together. We're getting the information from the camera. We're looking at helping prevent lameness. But there's so much more we can do. And when you get on a journey like this, you realise actually what can be done. So we've seen some of these images. We've worked with vets to be able to see these images. And really, there's about 30% lameness in the UK. 30% of cows are lame at any one point in the UK. That is not acceptable in my eyes. It's not acceptable in the public size. It's not acceptable to the people who are buying the food products. So therefore, this sort of thing needs to be challenged, and we need to look at what we can do to help reduce them problems. And that's just lameness. There's other issues as well. So as we go forward, what can we do? The world's our oyster. Technology is moving very, very rapidly. We need to work out how we can implement that technology within agriculture, within specifically for us, the dairy industry. We decided a long time ago that we would concentrate on lameness. We'll all keep it in our space. Everybody else is good at their own bit. We'll look at just doing that little bit, but use the technology, use the people, use the resources that we've got to be able to really challenge that issue that there is and make it better for everybody.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I really like the point you just picked up there on using the talent, using the resources from within Who Count as well, but clearly with the collaboration that you're doing across Innovate UK and other research projects that you're involved in, you're doing that across the sector and across the industry as well. And that shows real opportunity for collaboration and to move that dial forward as well. Carl, can I come to you? Similar question in terms of sort of the remit of FAI farms, maybe pick up on some of those projects that you're involved with at the moment, and what does next steps look for FAI farms?
Sure, yeah. So FAI Farms was established back in 2001, and that was with the establishment of a farm business tenancy agreement with Oxford University. So we farm 1,000 acres just on the outskirts of Oxford, and we've also got a sustainability consultancy business that sits alongside that. So the whole premise of the business is about supporting and improving animal welfare within our livestock systems. So I suppose the farm was really our playground in terms of, and it was very similar to some of the slides that were shown earlier, is that sort of pull through of science and R&D to, within a commercial environment. So there's great pieces of work that's done with a small number of livestock. Does it work within a commercial environment? And again, we had the opportunity to do that because we were sponsored by some of the clients that we work with, predominantly sort of within the food supply chain, retailers, food service. We did a range enrichment project back in 2005, which was really about tree planting on free-range systems, which had a massive impact on chicken welfare. Also had an impact on the economics, and obviously tree planting was sequestering carbon. So it was a really nice project in terms of when we talk about sustainability, we talk about 3 E's, so we talk about ethics, environment, and economics, which are all incredibly important. And it was a really nice project which touched all of those aspects. McDonald's UK took that research and implemented it within their supply chain in the UK. They then implemented it across their European supply chain, and then a few years ago, RSPCA adopted that as pretty much sort of standard practice. So we now see all of the free range units in the UK that have got range enrichment. So we've always had that sort of premise. So again, we've developed data systems. So again, working with our clients to collect things like antibiotics data, key welfare indicator data. A lot of this again is based around the broiler sector. So again, we're giving the industry information generally based on their commitments. So that whether that's our commitment is to improve animal welfare within our supply chain. So things like KWI sit really strongly within that, or whether they've got again I suppose things like One Health, which is about reducing antibiotic use within the supply chain, or the removal of HPCIAs. So again, the system has allowed our clients to sort of monitor that, ensure that they're delivering against some of their commitments. And again, one of the really powerful, I suppose, parts of that system is providing data back to the suppliers in terms of benchmarking data. What you tend to find is a lot of the industry is very insular. So they might sit there thinking our antibiotic use is phenomenal. All of a sudden, you get a list of 100 other suppliers. All this is anonymised, so we're not giving anything away. And all of a sudden, you realise you're in the top 10% of users of antibiotic use. And we've had 1 or 2 examples of that. Companies thought they were doing really, really well. All of a sudden, transparency in terms of their use. They've then gone out really hard with working with their vets and suppliers to reduce antibiotic use. So again, that acting on that data and information has been really important within those supply chains. From a farm perspective, we developed a system called Bird Box probably about 5-6 years ago, working with a guy called David Brass, who runs the Lakes, or owns the Lakes Free Range Egg company. And again, this was about, we've got sensors within the building, so these are environmental sensors, so they're capturing things like humidity, CO2, temperature. We've got monitoring water intake, the waste cells on the feed bins, so we're monitoring feed intake as well. There are bird weighers within the house, so it's monitoring bird weight. It's collating all of that information into a software solution. The stockmen are entering things like egg numbers, mortalities, reason for mortality, and then all of that information is set around parameters. So if there is anything that falls outside what you'll get, so if you start seeing a drop off in water consumption, then you'll get an alert to say there is something going on. So again, what you'll tend to see is you'll see water consumption will drop maybe 2 to 3 days before you see any clinical signs of a disease. Same with feed consumption. So again, you start getting very early indicators of problems. We've done research in terms of pre and post fitting our system. What we found is you get about a 3.5% increase in egg production, about a 2% reduction in mortality, and the economics of that is about £1.60 increase per bird. So if you're looking at, you're running 12,000 birds in a free range system, that's almost £20,000. That system is paying for itself within the first 6 months. So there's a very, very clear return on investment in terms of what we're doing. The next sort of iteration is we're looking at things like acoustics. So again, there's big issues within the egg laying industry around things called smothering. Again, not a massive amount of research done around smothering. We don't really understand why the birds do it, what are the triggers. So again, with the data that we're collecting, are there certain parameters and are there certain in terms of humidity, temperature, age of flock, point of lay, that predict, or you can predict that you're going to get a smothering event. And again, we don't really know from an industry the levels of mortality that we're getting from this, the triggers. So again, looking at all of these aspects, what we're trying to do is the farm will then get an alert to say there's a whole set of parameters here that are suggesting that you could get a smother event. So, and that could be, all you need to do is run the feed track. So you run the feed track, of course all the birds then run to the feeders and feed. So it could be fairly simple things that we can implement to avoid this. So the whole thing of what we're looking at doing is making sure that if we're reducing mortality, we're improving hen welfare. It's a fairly easy correlation. Economics, £1.60 a bird. That's a big saving. And once that system's in, you've paid for it. It's in, for the rest of its life. From an environmental perspective, if we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, if our birds are more productive, our greenhouse gas emissions per egg will reduce as well. So again, these are the systems that we're looking at. Is trying to address some of the real big challenges that we're faced with within the industry.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And I think the bit that sprung to my mind was Grace obviously talked about through the report. There's that real need to do that sort of systems research thinking, and actually what you're talking there is about sort of systems data use as well. And actually, how do we bring that across not just one sector, but how do we think about systematic data use as well as data collection and research as well? And really thinking about, some of those areas around smothering. Certainly had a lot of sort of conversations with some of our capabilities over the last few months on that area as well, which is really interesting. So thanks for that. Jack, can I come to you with a similar question in terms of just a bit of an overview of the types of areas that Pontus can focus on, and really from a priorities point of view, where do you see the direction of travel coming from?
Okay, so I founded Pontus 10 years ago, so we're in our 10th year. We are ostensibly a CRO, contract research organisation, so we do trialling for clients from around the world with a range of different species, and that's really why we have a site in Singapore and in the UK. So in the UK we're focusing on the salmonids, we also look at tilapia, carp, ornamentals as well. And in Singapore it focuses on the tropical marine species like shrimp, obviously a big global commodity now. Barramundi, grouper, those types of species. So I think it's important to sort of make the point that was highlighted in the slides, that aquaculture isn't just salmon, and it's a point of differentiation between aquaculture and the rest of the sectors here, in that beef, cattle, poultry, you are working with a single species with a single overall sort of way of living and digesting and that type of thing. In aquaculture, we're working with 10 or 20 different species, each with a different physiology, each with a different type of environment they live in, from 10 degrees up to 30 degrees, and from freshwater to saltwater. So it's a much more complex picture in terms of the industry, not necessarily the animal, but the industry. So what we've done in terms of looking at a number of different species is allowing our clients to optimise their products for a range of species. Obviously there's the ones that people focus on, the salmon, the trout and the shrimp, but the other ones maybe less in terms of volume, but in terms of the future, I think there's something to be looked at. And in that respect, we have an internal research project at the moment. As I said, we're mainly customer focused, but we do have an internal research project at the moment, which is all focused around sustainability and nutrition. And I think there was one thing, or a couple of things, missing from the sector priorities in aquaculture, in that I'm biased, but I think nutrition and production methods are key to sustainability in aquaculture. And nutrition is an obvious one, and it's cross-sectoral. It's soy reduction and it's greenhouse gas reduction in the process and in the supply chain. But in terms of production technologies, we're looking at a different future than I think maybe we imagined, especially with what's happening in Canada at the moment, with banning of offshore farming for salmon. There's only one place that can go, and that's on land, and that's where RAS, or recirculating aquaculture systems, comes in to the picture, and that throws up a whole range of opportunities as well as challenges. Challenges around capital, energy use and those type of things, but the opportunities around increasing sustainability, improving feeds, optimising feeds for recirculating systems. And our internal project is based around that, really. It's called Ensure Feeds, Innovative Sustainable RAS Feeds, and it's specifically focused at the moment on UK production. So we're focusing on carp, trout and shrimp. There's a reason. We don't produce any shrimp in the UK, but there are at least 4 or 5 different groups looking at multi-million-pound investments into land-based shrimp farm, and they need to be fed. And at the moment, there's a company in France that can supply. It's a challenge, especially with the new political situation we're in since 2016. So to have a bit more self-reliance in that respect, I think, is important. And in terms of sustainability, we're very reliant on soy and on imported fish meal for aqua feeds. So our project is looking at whether we can produce feeds for current and future aquaculture production in the UK using only UK sources of ingredients. So that means we essentially have to eliminate soy. We have to get rid of some of the fish products that are imported. There's also challenges in terms of the fact that when the types of fish products we do have access to are mainly based on salmon trimmings from the salmon industry. They then obviously can't be fed back to salmon, even trout. So there are challenges to overcome, and I mean that's the point of research. If there wasn't a challenge, there wouldn't be any point in doing it. And when we're looking at something like shrimp, which there is no production for, when we're talking to those groups who are looking at future shrimp production in the UK, we eat an enormous amount of shrimp. King prawns, and when I'm talking about shrimp, I'm talking about warm water king prawn type things, not cold water shrimp. and all that, every single piece of that is imported from Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and that's not good when we're talking about food security, when we're talking about sustainability. That's not a good situation to be in. So these people are looking at investing in shrimp in order to bring that production closer to home, also closer to the markets. You can put a land-based fish farm pretty much anywhere, as long as you've got the right resources. So you could have London could be ringed by a number of shrimp farms producing all the shrimp that London wants to eat, for example. But their story falls down a little bit when they're still using these feeds with ingredients that come from around the world, and so there's a lot of embedded carbon in the feeds that are going into the shrimp. So our project is to look at whether it's feasible to change that. And in terms of internationalisation of what we're looking at, it's a model that could be picked up and transported anywhere. There are lots of ingredients around the world that are available regionally, locally, and within countries. And so we hope that in the future we can expand the project to allow us to look at that wider global picture in terms of local production. Local feeds for local production is really what we're about.
Thanks, Jack. That was so. Yeah, in terms of that, I think there is a lot in there that probably resonates across the sectors. And certainly, I know within the UK Agri-Tech Centre, we've certainly got some cross-sectoral projects going on at the moment. But hopefully, that will spur some sort of conversation going forward. So just before we go to questions, so thinking caps on, please. We're getting lots of questions through from our attendees online, which is fantastic. But definitely want to get some questions from in the room as well. Just thinking about, obviously, Grace sort of delivered some of those key areas or the key roles that those that engage with the report sort of fed into that. But really just wanting to sort of maybe pick your brains in terms of the panel as well. So maybe, Carl, I could come to you first. And thinking about, the role of the UK Agri-Tech Centre, what do you see that role being to get the most impact and opportunity across the sector and indeed your business?
Yeah, I think in terms of when you've got any new concept, whether that's software, hardware, it's really difficult to self-fund that as a business. Certainly, I know, having spoken to Anthony, self-startups, for us we're a little bit bigger, but things like cash flow, that engagement with the industry, communication is really, really difficult. So I think, the more sort of collaborators and engagement and support that we can have, I think is really important, because I think there's and I've certainly seen some amazing technical solutions, but they sort of disappear after 12-18 months because the funding dries up, and then they're lost.
Oh, you talk my language completely. Oh. Longevity of adoption is absolutely a key point. Jack, can I come to you with the same question in terms of the role of the UK Agri-Tech Centre in your wider sector and your business?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it about the sort of cross-sectoral things that we're doing, and I think that's really where the Agri-Tech Centre can really help. I think it was highlighted by Grace about the funding landscape, and that almost every grant that comes out for to develop sustainable feeds or production methods or reduce greenhouse gas emissions always has a no aquaculture clause, and that's a pity, because I think we can I think aquaculture can give a lot more. It was mentioned that it's a very innovative sector, and that's partly because we've got so many different species that we're having to work with, but we don't have access to the same kind of level of funding, and I think and then going back to the cross-sectoral thing, we've got people in the room I know that are working on insects, for example, and when we're talking about UK produced ingredients, insects could be a really important part of that, but we're really behind the curve in the UK. France and the Netherlands have got a couple of big companies that probably a lot of people know, and we haven't got there, and we need to get there. So I think that's where the Agri-Tech Centre can really help, is to drive the almost lobby, a lobbying role as well, in terms of where can the funding come from, and can aquaculture be more embedded in sort of agriculture landscape.
Brilliant. And the same for you, Anthony, in terms of the benefits of UK Agri-Tech Centre, in terms of the sector that you work in and your business.
So yeah, we've got experience all the way through. There's a number of different areas where I think the Agri-Tech Centre really helped us. First of all, the bid writing. You know, it was essential to actually win the bid for the Innovate UK project, and we've never done that on our own because I've not got the expertise of the English language basics to be able to do that sort of thing. So that was a good start. Then the project management itself, you know, it's hard running a project. It's hard running a project and keeping to timescales, keeping the deliverables there, doing your risk charts and everything like that. And that was guided, you know, expertly through by the Agri-Tech centres. Giving some facility, we have a good network of customers' farms, so we already had our own test farms, but it was nice to have one that was actually controlled by Agri-Tech to be able to really put some sort of control on there without, you know, feeling like being a burden to a farmer. And then going forward, you know, we've got a meeting tomorrow with the Muller Group down at South West Development Centre. We've already had a Latin trade meeting down at that centre as well. And there's just so many opportunities that brings together, but the collaboration, you know, again, is the people. And the collaboration between the Agri-Tech Centre, between Bristol Robotics, we would never have achieved that on our own. And the funding is great, but actually paying for those people to do that sort of thing is what was essential to us, because we couldn't have taken the risk to do that.
So yeah, bringing that all together, and that absolutely fits in with the Connect, Aspire, Grow, Adopt that Ruth put in today. And every single one of those points we can match that within part of the framework. So thank you for that. Phil, just wanted to come to you in terms of how does what you've heard just now, and certainly the bits that Grace has sort of given an overlap in terms of the report. How does that resonate with you, and how does that mean that the UK Agri-Tech Centre are going to move forward?
I thought the slide that Grace had kind of captured a few points, and there's a couple of things I'll pull out on that. But I suppose, look, when I look at it, what we've brought together as one organisation coming together, we've got a wealth of assets, and they cover capabilities, they cover knowledge, they cover network. And it's where those three aspects come together that I think we can maximise value and impact. And I think that's what I've heard from you all, actually, is kind of the experience has been, it hasn't just been one aspect of those, it's being able to pull things together and join them. So that kind of gives me a whole host of heart and confidence that we're heading in the right direction in terms of where we're heading, and some of the strategic plans that we're developing and sharing. In terms of just some of the pointers that Grace had, there's some things that, you know, industry say we want and this is useful. I think we're already doing some of that. So one that jumped out for me was around showing capabilities. And it was back when we were in this room 3 months ago. Delighted that we had Indra Mukherjee, who's the Chief Exec of Innovate UK. He challenged the sector and challenged us to be a bit more rock and roll. And I responded to that by saying, we're going to go out on tour. And actually that's kind of what we're doing in terms of showcasing some of the capabilities, because when you're able to go and see firsthand what the potential is, some of the research that is happening, speak to some of the experts and get different perspectives, that's where great things happen. So showing capabilities, and you mentioned about South West Area Development Centre, conscious we've regularly got groups out of there, but that's the same for various capabilities in the network. So always happy to host, always happy to explore and keep an eye out for events from within the network. The other one I think that as I start to look at it is, I suppose, trying to join up some of those different aspects in the fragmented landscape, particularly around some of the government aspects. And you know what, it's great that Agri-Tech has got so much interest from different government departments. It's not just from DEFRA, it's not just from DSIC, it's not just from the Department of Business and Trade and some of the stuff they do with inward trade missions. There's the energy security and net zero. Great that we've got interest. I think it's probably fair to say that there's always scope to try and improve some of the cohesion and linkages within that. And one of the things that we've been able to do already, I think, as UK Agri-Tech Centre is hopefully kind of get in the room and add a bit of that cohesion. Because I think when we're all pulling in the right direction or pulling in the same direction at the same time, we can achieve so much more. That's not to downplay some of the great things that happen, whether it's the funding support now, but that's probably a role for me that says actually that's, yeah, it's that leadership, that advocacy and coordinating, I think, where we can continue to really accelerate innovation.
Brilliant, no, thanks for that, and that really pulls that together. So what we're now going to do is open it up for Q&A, and fantastic people that organised this session provided me with paperwork and technology, so I'm trying to juggle both, and obviously all of you in the room. So we'll try and get through as many sort of questions in the next 10 minutes as we can. So is there anybody in the room that has a question on anything you've heard today, anything about the report, or any key points that really wanted to sort of raise after hearing about what's being delivered today? Any key questions? Suzanne, can we have a roving mic to Suzanne, please? But keep those questions coming in from our virtual members as well. Suzanne.
So I have a question that's partly to Grace, but also it'd be really interesting to hear others' views. It was really good to hear the sort of focus around systems and circular systems, and also the reference to One Health and nutrition. And it would just be interesting to get a sense of how important you think new markets and new potential processing technologies, again, thinking about the connection that Jack made with insects and their role in providing new feed. Actually, how important are those supply chains in this new innovative space that we're thinking of in 10 years hence?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's why I put insects on the slide, because we're tentatively going forward, but there's others that are taking a bigger leap ahead, and so we've got to have not only the research and looking at the welfare and the ethics and all of that, but actually that scale up the supply chain, the new markets, absolutely need to develop that into it. It's when there are solutions staring you in the face, you've got to find ways to see how you can make the most of that potential. And so, yeah, that's a really big theme and sits in with the bigger sustainability piece, absolutely, yeah.
Anybody else want to comment on that one? Otherwise we'll go to...
The only thing I'd add is I always come at it from the economics perspective as well. They're trying to think about do the numbers stack up? Is it viable? So I suppose that's another bit where I start to think about some of the circularity challenges. There's science might have the answer, but is it something that can effectively be rolled out and hit certain price points? And I think that's again another lens that we're increasingly looking at from a UK Agri-Tech Centre perspective.
And I think that's really, to sort of drill down into insects a little bit, I think that's really the crucial problem to be solved in insects is the price point. We look at, obviously when we're formulating feeds, they have to be affordable, and at the moment insects are quite a bit more expensive than the thing we're replacing, which is a challenge in and of itself. But then comes the circularity part around feedstocks, and what feedstocks do we have in enough quantity, and sort of evenness of supply. You can't, obviously, as an ingredient, you can't have a different nutritional profile in September than you do in June. And that's a big problem with feedstock supplies.
That's brilliant, thank you. Thank you for the question, Suzanne. So just coming online, we've talked a bit about synergies and opportunities across sector already, but one question is, where do you see the synergies and opportunities coming from other sectors, and vice versa, where can Agri-Tech be utilised wider? Maybe Jack and Anthony and Carl, if I can ask you for maybe one example of some cross-sector work that's ongoing or that you'd like to see happening?
I can jump in there. So we're currently in part of this project. We're doing LCA work with Agri-Tech Centre actually. So there's a lot of different methodologies for LCAs, but I think that's one aspect where methodologies developed for other sectors can be utilised to add value into specifically in our case into this project.
Carl, anything new in terms of that cross-sector element?
Yeah, I mean, we just finished a project which was Innovate UK funded. We were working with Dumbia, so we were looking at dairy genetics, I suppose, coming into the farm, which is predominantly, it's organic and it's regeneratively grazed. So it was really understanding sort of how those genetics sort of perform within that. So yeah, we engaged with AHDB. And I think what we saw from the project is probably there's only about 10% of the animals that performed anywhere near would be acceptable. So that left 90% of those animals that did not perform well within our system. So that then raises the question back to the dairy sector in terms of what are the genetics that they're selecting, to produce beef animals that are then coming into that beef supply chain. And again, it touches on all of those issues in terms of biodiversity, carbon sequestration, food security. How can we link all of that up as opposed to the dairy industry potentially looking at these calves as a waste stream that somebody else picks up? Because this is not the chicken industry. We are not finishing these animals in 8 weeks. These animals are on farm for 2 years. And if we got things like performance isn't great, colostrum is still a massive issue. And again, we talk about some of the things that we've been drilling farmers for years. And they also, we know about that. We know about colostrum. Well, why are we seeing calves that come through into our system that have come, from a particular farm that don't perform, and we're dealing with that animal for the next 2.5 years. That's a massive challenge. And again, I think it's just linking beef sector up with the dairy sector. So, and it was really interesting that AHDB were quite interested in potentially developing sort of a regenerative pasture EBV for some of those animals, that we can actually make an informed decision to say that's the genetics that will work within our system.
Yeah, really important to create that informed decision, to allow decisions to be made, to allow change on farm. And Anthony, anything from yourself in terms of
just
the...
a slightly different slant on the question, really. Yes, there's cross-sector, but there's also cross-industry.
Yep.
We've used technology with vision systems. My other passion is Formula One. And we have a joke in the office because I have cars scattered around the office. And I say to everybody, look at Formula One. They're always striving to improve what they're doing. And whatever they're using to get there, we can apply to every industry. So they're using AI to do digital twins of different things. Can we use AI to do digital twins of livestock? Can we do these sort of things? Let's look at what's out there in the other industries. And then when you go cross-sector, we've obviously developed a camera system which keeps itself clean in a really dirty environment. Now, if we can use that in other sectors, in other industries, then why not? And in the beef herd, in the sheep herd, there's a lot of different things. There's always technology can be used in many different areas, many different ways.
Absolutely, it was great. Phil, you want to chip in?
Yeah, just one of the great things actually about the first 3 months of the UK Agri-Tech Centre has been able to look outside of our industry, and Innovate UK have been a big help with some of the catapults, which are the bodies that are trying to accelerate innovation in some targeted sectors. So whether it's kind of look at the link up with satellite applications, high value manufacturing, that's been a real kind of eye opener to look at actually what are the technologies and know-how approaches that we can start to pull in and apply to ag.
Yeah, right. I'm just going to give them a 5-minute warning, so I've got one more question that I can take. Gentleman who was first, I think. Can we get a microphone down here, please? With one more question, and then in my normal way, I have a killer question for the panel. So one more question, please.
I hope it's a good one. My name is Jake Davis from Poultry Network. Just in practical terms, if I'm a business with an idea, with no awareness of the grant landscape, anything like that, no awareness of Agri-Tech Centre, how do I approach you? What's the initiation like? What's the onboarding like? And can you sort of sell some of the benefits for the people who've gone through the process or in it as well? Just that kind of real practical element to it. If that's okay.
Come have a chat to us, as simple as that. But I know you guys have kind of had linkages, so it'd be interesting to kind of hear your take on it and that entry point. Hopefully we're informal, accessible, but that's the tap into that broader network, that expertise.
I hate joining groups. I hate organisations as such, and I just reached out. I think it was Annabelle at the time, who just said become a member, and then Duncan, who was head of dairy at the time, would just give us a ring, and from there on the road was seamless. So you just got to reach out.
I think it is, like, reach out. We've got so many different channels and methods that actually we are able to connect with now. And being a big organisation, we've got a multidisciplinary, multi-specialism, which is really fantastic. So, right, killer question to the panel. Oh, sorry, somebody want to come in? Anybody else want to add to that? No? Okay. Killer question. So, 3 bits, please. Thinking about the specific challenges of your wider sector area, what do you think are the 3 top opportunities that we're able to move that dial so that we can provide that resilient, viable and sustainable future across the industry? 3 top things.
Okay. For me, I think I mentioned a couple of them, but it's nutrition. It's looking at improving feeds. it's diversification of production methods and getting investment in the right places. And the third one is more diversification, but species. We're, especially in the UK, we're obsessed with bland whitefish, but we need to.
We want colour, more flavour.
Yeah, more flavour, and then that leads into everything else as well.
Brilliant. Grace?
I think I had a slide with 3 things on it. But to go back, and I think of our role rather than specific innovations, it's the lens of really looking at systems, it's thinking about people and that connecting across transdisciplinary research, a bit of a mouthful, but actually they're the opportunities where you spot bringing very different people, different backgrounds together, and a firm hand on understanding the supply chains, the economics, and driving that in a way that makes sense so that we can get there. I think here are my 3 things.
Fantastic, thank you. Carl, your 3?
Yes, I think the opportunity around sort of optimising performance, and certainly that would be related to health and welfare. I think the nutritional element, again, most of the poultry systems, when you look at their carbon footprint, 70 to 80% of it is made up, from the feed component. So, how do we look at different feed sources, coming into our sector? Soy, as we've already heard, is a massive challenge for the poultry sector. And I think the big one is some of the behavioural stuff. AI, how do we know, when an animal's happy? Because that is the big opportunity, I think.
There's a whole can of worms there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think we've got camera technology and AI that that we can then start proving that our animals are performing well as they're happy and content.
Brilliant. And yourself, Anthony?
I think from the dairy industry point of view, your public perception is key. I think we really need to work hard at that, one way or another. Animal welfare is obviously a big issue. We need to work hard at that. I think from a dairy farming is very set in its ways. Adoption of new technologies and how we get that to the farmer, how we can get them to use the technologies we've got, get the data out of it, to provide them with the systems they needed. I think that's a big thing that we need to be able to do in the next 10 years.
Fantastic, and that fits slap bang into that area, and we've had some more questions that have come in online that I just haven't got time for. But Phil, your closing 3 thoughts.
Oh gosh, 3. So
just 3.
Echoing what they do, look, adoption is a big one for me, and I think it's an area that as kind of legacy centres we've probably stopped short of. It's why we've been really clear about actually the UK Agri-Tech Centre trying to do more in terms of that adoption space and move the dial, because I think as Ruth said, look, if we see research and development that never makes it to the end user, then it's just invention, it's not innovation, it needs to roll out. So that adoption angle I think is one for me. The whole area around data and AI, conscious it is a can of worms, right? But we see AI around us all the time, yeah? We see adverts on phones, we see it on TV. Actually, what's the role and how can we start to deploy it? Now, I think in our industry, there's 1 or 2 challenges over trust, there's 1 or 2 challenges over data sharing still that we need to get over, but quite excited around that. And ultimately, I suppose I just echo that performance angle. And I love the Formula 1 analogy. We use it quite a lot internally, actually, because I think in our industry, how do we start to make just some of those incremental gains that ultimately impact on what we do? Because I don't think there are the silver bullets when it comes to certain parts of our sector and the challenges that we face. We need to be focused on trying to make consistent gains. So whatever we do, let's not lose sight of actually we're trying to make a difference and we're trying to improve things.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you for all the questions, both online and in the room today. It's been a really great panel session. We've heard lots about collaborative approaches, we've heard cross-sector, we've heard cross-industry, and I think all of that fits into all of those key points that were delivered both from Phil, from Ruth and from Grace this morning. So thank you for everyone for taking part. I'm going to hand over to Phil for the final area. Thank you.
And I'm conscious of time, so I will be really quick. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us today here and online. Thanks for contributions. I'm really keen to see some of the questions that have come in, and I think if we try and pick those up, we'll share those in a blog, or we'll try and get those online and pick those up in a bit more detail. Thank you for the panellists that have joined us today. Really appreciate that insight. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think I'm always amazed when we do get people in the room and hear what's happening. I can't help but reflect that sometimes our industry comes in for a bit of criticism about what we're not doing, Actually, we're doing some fantastic things. There's some marvellous things happening in terms of agri-innovation space. Let's elevate those great things. Yes, we need to do more. Yes, we maybe need to do some of it faster or on a larger scale, but my God, some of the narrative that we pick up about our industry versus a reality, there's a big gap. And I'd hope that actually as one organisation we can start to challenge that and be an advocate for all the great stuff that is happening as well. So look, just want to say thank you again to everybody. Thank you for the team that produced the report and put on today, and have a great afternoon.